Hello, I'm Eddie Ches. I'm the Director of Media Technologies for the Nonverbal Group. This is the second video in the series that we're doing, and we are documenting the soundproofing process for our offices here in Chelsea, New York. We had the contractor this week primarily focus on beginning demolition, and also, as you can look up and see, they've started and almost completed all of the caulking. They've been using USG acoustical sealant to go between the gaps and cracks and floorboards, kind of like to stop as much sound that can leak through as possible. If you use the analogy of a dam, and a dam has a few holes, if you plug only one hole, the sound will find a way to get through to the other holes. If you have nothing around the dam, the water will just go around the dam. So the idea is to stop as much path, or any path that the water can take, or the sound in this case can take. You try to seal it up with as much material as possible. In this case, acoustical sealant. The other material we used was here, the expanding foam, which we used to fill up some of these big holes that were just like really deep and wide. So the contractor actually went in and he removed old grout that could fall apart, and then kind of like chiseled in and filled up as much of it as possible because there was a wide gap. Directly overhead, that's where the radiator is and their primary office. So that's where a lot of the sound was coming from. So he went ahead and did that. Another thing that the contractor did was they pointed out that the electricity, the way our space, because it's an old loft, the way it is currently set up is that the electricity is running by conduits. These conduits are set up to run all over the office, whether connected to the joists or along the floor. It was even running across the sheetrock. So they removed it all because what we want to do is minimize any kind of penetration from the walls and also from the ceiling. So what we're going to do is that we're going to run the electricity below the insulation, but above the hat channel and above the sheetrock. So the BX cable will run through into position, and we're going to drill a small hole just big enough for the cable to go through, and then we will fill the gap or any space between the BX and the sheetrock with acoustical sealant. So that way we minimize the amount of space. Because if we were to cut a square, yes, we could put the fire putty behind it, but wouldn't it make more sense to have a hole about the size of a quarter instead? And then we could mount the gang box outside of it onto the sheetrock. I know some people may say it's not as professional and maybe uglier, but we're going for sound mitigation as much as possible. So that's the route we went with. Argemiro Mesa, he's the contractor, as well as Al de Jesus. They highly recommended that, let me take that again. So the contractor Al, do it again. So the contractors Al and Miro, who we work with exclusively here in this building, they suggested it because it would minimize the amount of sound that would come through. So it was a great idea on their part. And also, it eliminates the need to use fire putty. So we save money there. Not much, but it's another cost savings. The other thing that they decided to do, or we've decided to do, is that because this is an old space, all our wiring was crazy. It was mismatched. So we took this opportunity to expose the walls, to really see inside where the holes are. Like, look at this. There was we were wondering why there was so much sound coming through from the other side. There's literally just a huge gap in the wall. So all that sound was coming through. There's no insulation. So what we decided to do is, now that we found them, we'll have to go on the other side, seal those holes. Then all of the old BX cables that we have here, we're going to remove them and then relocate them into better positions. Then we're going to fill with acoustical sealant any kind of gaps that there may be, and then put rock sool cap it with vinyl, and then hit it with 5/8 fire code sheetrock. So that's really what's been going on. It's just been receiving materials, starting the demolition, and preparing the electricity, because you don't want to do the electrical after you've done the ceiling. I'm sure a lot of you guys know that already, but that's what we're doing now. Oh, keep in mind that when you do demolition, be prepared to have your own auxiliary lights, because if you gut all the lights out, all the wires, you won't have any power. So you'll have to run your lines and your lights from power from beyond. So make sure you have plenty of proper gauge extension cords that are thick enough to hold the load for any lights and stuff. When it comes to materials, there is something that's important to keep in mind. When you're dealing with vendors who custom order things for you, you won't be able to return things. So even though you develop a good relationship with your local vendors and they appreciate your business, but the fact that some of them will not take back or give you a refund for materials that you've ordered could put you out. One of the reasons why we chose Home Depot is because they have a great return policy. So because this is our first time doing this, and hopefully it works, so we won't have to do it again, but we ordered more insulation, about 20% more insulation than we had projected, just in case for overage or errors in calculation, or just areas that we need to reinforce with more insulation. So we went with them because they have a great return policy. So what we decided to do is just carefully unload them, bring them up, and whatever we don't use, hopefully we'll be able to return for our credit. We've started demoing, but they've started filming Law & Order downstairs. So unfortunately, we couldn't bring our container in to dump out. So what we've been doing is we've been stockpiling the garbage and old sheetrock inside of here until they're done, which should be about Tuesday. So that's another thing to consider, is that depending on where you're doing this work, like for example, us in Manhattan, we have to actually work with a lot of systems that are in place that could interfere with what we're doing. So in that case, we have to wait for the dumpster. So we have a few days delay on that. Take that into account. Another thing I wanted to point out, this is really funny. Make sure that when you have people receiving your materials, that they're aware of how much materials you're supposed to be receiving. We ordered 60 bundles. One of them has the number. We ordered 60, but Home Depot only delivered 36. So we were wondering where the missing bundles were. So 2 days later, when I finally caught up with all the work, I was noticing that, and then I spoke to the folks at Home Depot, and they were kind enough to realize a mistake. And the next day, they sent over the missing 24. So we're good on that. So always be in communication with your teams. Make sure you just let them know what's going on, like front end, as well as have them communicate any obstacles that they've been encountering. If you're doing this alone, then you won't have to worry about it because you'll know everything. But when you're dealing with many people, that's something you have to definitely consider. Share the knowledge. That's pretty much it. So until the next video, I hope that this gives you a little glimpse as to what we're doing here. And hopefully next time you'll be seeing some insulation going up. All right, have a great night.